New this evening. I am in my car. I am in my car because it is the quietest place on my property. In my yard but it's cold. It's cold for us in Austin. But a couple months ago, probably around October, November, I started doing a couple videos on carbohydrates. I know we're all confused about carbs, right? I mean, we hear a lot of negative things about carbs. And then I was planning to do more. I had a poor connection there. But then the holidays came and like whisked us away. And, anyway, so here I am now. And so I wanted to talk today specifically about beans, okay? Like the magical food, musical fruit, whichever way you want to look at it. And I made a post a few days ago asking people what your opinions were on beans. Good, bad, undecided. And I loved hearing from you guys. I like hearing what you have to say, so thanks to those of you that shared. And a lot of you shared a lot of the positives, good plant-based protein source, loaded with fiber, nutrients. There's also a lot of phytochemicals in there, which are like antioxidants, right? But you hear a lot of bad things about beans, right? And carbs in general, beans specifically. So why do they get a bad rap? So I wanted to bring up why are they kind of tainted, if you will? I'll be honest, there's a lot of different food philosophies around, a lot of different groups that follow certain food cultures. And as a credentialed nutrition professional, I feel like most of my videos, I just try to hit on the highlights. What do people need to know? What do they, the positive, what should we focus on, right? But I feel like if I don't address some of the naysaying or some of the reasons why people are against beans, for example, then it's almost as if my knowledge base is being called into question amongst these groups. So I kind of wanted to address some of that today. I just felt it. So carbs, they have carbs in them, right? So carbs get a bad rap. And that is true. We got to watch how many carbs we eat and what kinds, because yes, it can lead to weight gain and high triglycerides and all that good stuff. Bad stuff, really. But it's really the type of carbs that really matter the most. So beans are the type of carb we should be having in the right amounts, okay? They're just, the soluble fiber in it actually turns into a gel in our stomach. So instead of this spiking of blood sugar that causes a lot of high insulin and weight gain and just feeling crummy, it doesn't do that. It actually creates like that nice steady rise that I've talked about before. But aside from carbohydrates, okay, you might hear some people talk about lectins, phytic acid or phytates, or saponins in beans. And they talk very negatively at the fact that beans have these in them and that we should eliminate them from our diets. I just want to shed some light on what that is. Okay, so there was this, seriously, I read this one nutrition pamphlet magazine. It is a reputable source of information. And they had this topic of lectins, and there was a cardiologist's website. And in there it said something about beans causing basically, quote, a chemical warfare in the body, leading to digestive problems, weight gain, high cholesterol, arthritis, and brain fog. Okay, but that only happens, it is true that lectins can do that to your stomach, your GI, but only if you eat them raw. Only if you eat them raw. If you cook them, you deactivate the lectins. So canned beans or cooked beans. So there's really not much of an issue with lectins with that. And you got to look at this guy's ulterior motive. He's selling a supplement to block lectin. So he has an ulterior motive. Okay. Phytates, phytic acid. It is true, and saponins, they do bind with minerals in our food, like calcium, iron, magnesium, things like that. It does bind to them and prevent the absorption. However, the risk for deficiency is super minimal. Super minimal as long as your fiber intake is reasonable, because most fiber-containing foods has those compounds in them, and as long as your mineral intake is adequate. Of all the food diaries I've read and talked to people, you rarely see people who are going overboard on the fiber that's putting them at risk for phytates and phytic acid and saponins to inhibit any of their absorption of the minerals they're eating. And you have to think, plants do not exist on this earth to benefit us. They are here to survive. So they don't have an immune system. So instead they have all these antioxidants in them to protect them. So it's the risk of deficiency is minimal. There's a lot of benefits to phytic acid and saponins and those things. They actually are anti-cancer, lower blood cholesterol. So I think sometimes these groups take one small little piece about something, one small little piece in this really big picture of food and nutrition, and they focus on that. And what does that do to the consumer? What does that do to the general public? It scares us, it makes us want to avoid beans, and they are cheap and easy, very nutrient-dense food that we should be eating. Can you get too much of a good thing? Yes. Have you guys ever seen people that juice carrots and too much? They turn orange. Have you seen that? It does happen. Too much beta-carotene. It can happen. Totally happen. So can we eat too much fiber or foods that have too much of this phytic acid or saponins? Well, sure. But even on my dandiest of days, when I'm like following exactly the advice I give out, I hit that mark of the recommended fiber intake. So for men, it's 30 to 38 grams of fiber. Women, about 25 grams. And you can get there. You got to be vigilant. Eating whole foods, that is. I'm talking dietary fiber. But you're not going to really risk yourself at really going over and putting yourself in this situation where eating beans is going to inhibit absorption of all these other nutrients. It's not as likely, especially in our country and whatnot. There are some other areas in the world that may be exposed to that as a risk, but not really. So I guess what I'm trying to say is beans are awesome, man. I mean, if you like beans, eat the beans. We have, when we say look at your plate, a quarter of that plate is the starch. Beans are starch. So if you're eating that amount of beans, you're good to go. You're getting all the good stuff. They're not a bad thing. They're good to incorporate. So anyway, get your bean on and find different ways to make them. And I just hope this maybe cleared some of the air on some of the negativity you hear about beans specifically. So they ain't a bad thing, y'all. You guys have a good night. It's now bath time. So I gotta go. See ya.